Hello listeners, welcome to At the Heart of It, a podcast by ROXY. This podcast celebrates the stories of women in surf, snow and everything in between. Join us as our athletes, friends of the brand and incredible women share their inspiring stories. Get ready to be motivated and stay tuned for empowering conversations and uplifting tales that will leave you inspired. Let's dive into the world of remarkable women together.
Are you ready? Because I'm ready. All right. Aloha, everybody. Welcome back to the ROXY podcast. My name is Mainei Kinimaka, and I am a ROXY surfer, and I'm here today with my sister, who is also a ROXY surfer, Maluhia Kinimaka. Say what's up, Malu.
Aloha mai kako, everybody. And then where are you right now, Renee?
I am in Aotearoa, New Zealand. I'm in Tauranga Moana, and I'm actually going to Tahiti today. So I'm super excited. And where are you?
Right now I'm at Pupukea. I'm in Hawaii. And so it's cool that we get to talk to each other, even though we're like, was it like 2,000 something plus miles away?
Yeah. Yeah, we're about to complete the Hawaiian or the Polynesian triangle, I'm assuming. Sweet. Okay, so today we are here to chat a little bit about Earth Day. We're going to celebrate ka honua, the earth, and we're going to talk a little bit about our experience as surfers in the ocean and your experience as a scientist in the ocean and how that impacts our world as a whole. And then also how our culture, our Hawaiian culture, plays a part in that, as well as all indigenous cultures in the world, as it is a holistic sense altogether. It all ties it back into one. So a little bit about Maluhia. Maluhia is my older sister. She's always been the brainy one of the family. She's always been the scientist and always been good with all the analytical stuff and all the things that, make sense. She's been on top of it all. So Maluhia is a marine scientist who is currently doing research on Oahu in Hawaii. So Maluhia, do you want to tell us a little bit about how you got into what you got into? I can say it was from a young age. I think you were destined to be a scientist. So why don't you tell everybody a little bit about that?
Am I allowed to introduce you as well after?
Yeah.
Because I think what you do also is a form of science through storytelling, which I think sometimes is more effective than, writing up a giant document.
I'll take that.
But yes, let's see. I mean, right now I'm going to university at UH Manoa. I'm working on my master's and then my PhD in marine biology. I specialize in coral reef ecology, so I kind of look at the science of our corals and seeing how everything fits together and trying to holistically figure out how to restore and have, I would say, long-term longevity for our coral reef ecosystems. But most of my research actually, because as a Kanaka Maoli, it's really important that my research be community based. So even though I'm on Oahu now, working and researching in the lab at UH Manoa, most of my research is going to be focused on Anahola, which is where you and I grew up, because that place really holds a special significance in my heart. And living there for pretty much 25 plus years, you come to notice a lot about the environment and how the landscape should be. And so I really believe that science should never be done from a removed standpoint. I think involving as many community peoples and people that live in that space to fix that space is really like, how do I say this? Holistic community inclusion is how we're going to fix global warming and giant issues. So.
Right. Yeah. Because if what is the science if you're not using it to apply it to the communities that you're gathering the data from?
Exactly.
Which I think through you is something that I've learned a lot about, which we'll get into more deep context later. I've learned so much from you in a short amount of time, stuff that I had no idea about. So right now you're doing all this amazing research. You're taking your research and you're applying it back to communities. You're hoping to build up to these places, that these things that you want to do in Anahola back in our home community. What was your original inspiration for wanting to pursue marine science? Because just a little context for Maluhia. Maluhia wasn't always a marine scientist, but you always were a scientist. Can you talk a little bit about, even from when you were a kid, what was the initial thing that drew you towards science? And then from there, can you talk to us about the pathway that you took to get to where you are?
Yeah, absolutely. Let's see. I guess, well, you know me from like being a little kid. I just had a freakishly long attention span. And
It's
I would
true.
notice the smallest things that other people would like kind of glaze over. And I was always like really curious. And so I feel like for somebody who's a scientist, having the traits of curiosity, noticing small things, and kind of like having a good imagination is really important. Actually, even though science now is presented as very, like stiff, stale, you have to be good at noticing patterns. And so I feel like when I was little, having that gifts or like not gifts, like having that trait and also having the background of when you grow up as a Hawaiian person, I feel like you know what I mean? Like how would you say that? Like when you grow up as a Hawaiian child and they just encourage you to like
Yeah, you're naturally drawn towards the natural world. I guess your attention is always towards the natural world anyway, but you were just freakishly good at establishing connections between things that were going on and things that are. So, yeah,
I mean, also too, it started with dad teaching us
right.
about the ocean, and it started with him taking us to all these different spots, showing us kind of like, oh, this spot is good when the weather is like this. It started with, or even like, you can see this wave ends up getting good when this kind of like when the river blows out, and like taking us to different fishing places, even taking us to different special places on Kauai, and kind of showing us that like connecting to these
Mm,
places is a way that we can connect to each other as well because it was the three of us always going and doing that. Um, and so for me, I think that was really important in terms of like establishing that connection and that curiosity and then carrying it over to other parts
yeah.
of life.
Yeah, I definitely think that all indigenous people are scientists. I think that indigenous people, people who live closely to the land, don't really have a choice not to be because you're always observing your natural environment and saying, okay, well, this is happening. This is a whole island or a sign of something that's going to happen now, or this is the time to do this. The moon is like this, we should plant that. So, yeah, definitely. So, I guess that means that for everybody else listening, if you like surfing, you might be more of a scientist than you thought. At least that's what I'm going to think. It's true, though. Yeah. I mean, the
Exactly.
tides and the reefs and everything like that.
Well, also, I would say even what you do in terms of your storytelling, your movie making, that's another form of science too, because science is all about documentation and sharing what you know with others around you. And if you can't do that effectively, then what are you doing, you know?
Right.
So like, do you want to talk about, I feel like since you were little too, you've been very creative in terms of movie making, expression through physicality, dancing, surfing. So, like, how did you get into documentation and storytelling from a young age?
Um, I guess, yeah, I definitely was always a pretty spunky little kid, that's for sure. I remember I got my first camera from grandma and grandpa gave me this thing called a flip, and it was like it kind of looked like a Motorola Razor, but it was like a camera and it only had it was like it looked like a USB hard drive with like a little lens
I
on one
remember
side and
that.
the other side with
I
a
remember
screen.
that thing.
And I think it was literally just to like flip it around and like film yourself and then film other people. And when I got it, I used to just film like everything and everybody, and then I would talk to the camera and like narrate what everyone was doing, then film it. And then the card would be full, and I we didn't have a computer.
Yeah, I
So I
remember
would just
that.
go delete all and then just keep recording. So like nothing ever came of any of the footage, but I just like I don't know what drew me towards doing that. And then after that I kind of just really became interested in cameras, but I never had one. And then I had a friend of ours, Brianna Cope. Her dad had a like whatever was the first model of like a Canon
It was a
Rebel.
Canon. It
Yeah,
was a
it was
really
like it
old
was an
Canon
old
Rebel.
Canon Rebel, and I remember the second one came out, and I was always like bugging him to use it when he had it at surf contests and stuff. So when he got the new one, he was like, "Oh, you can have it," which was the sickest thing ever. And I was probably like 12 at that point, and I was just taking photos of everything, taking photos of all kinds of stuff in Anahola, like random stuff like boars' heads on the side of the road, just taking photos of all kinds of stuff in our hometown of Anahola. But
Or also too, it would be like you would ask me or mom, you would find this very curated shot that you really liked, and you'd be like, "Can you take the photo?" Like, yeah. So,
Oh yeah.
and it was always like you were thinking of the most unique things.
Yeah, I was always thinking about daydreaming, pretty much always daydreaming, and then just being like, what if we did this? And then somehow getting everyone to to do, play a part and somehow getting it done. But no, I ended up when I was in high school, I was taking photos and doing media stuff, and I definitely attribute like even wanting to make short films and stuff and films at all from my teacher, Miss Ren Bacon. Shout out Miss Ren Bacon. She's amazing. She was an amazing teacher at Kapa'a High School, public high school. Yeah, it's amazing what the impact of a good teacher has on you. I mean, like you would know the same thing. I had one good teacher in my life and she literally changed the course of my whole life. Like I wouldn't be here
Yeah,
right
Miss.
now doing film and television if not for Miss Ren
Yeah,
Bacon almost 10 years ago. So it's pretty crazy. But yeah, and then
yeah, and I conversely also wouldn't be here without Miss Bailey,
yeah,
who was my high school, like she was like my calculus 1 and calculus 2 teacher. And she was like literally the best teacher. She worked so hard to make sure that like, because our public school was pretty bad.
shout out
Um,
Kapa'a High School. I loved it though.
Shout out, but
Okay, I loved it.
I loved it too. But the academics were like, but anyway, like Miss Bailey worked really, really, really hard in order to make sure that any deficits that we had were addressed. And like that woman put like her heart and soul into teaching us math. And I honestly think that that was what carried and sparked my interest. The way that she saw math and its use was so unique from any other teacher I had ever had that it really was. I was like, wow, math is really useful. I can use it to solve real world problems. And so, yeah, shout out to Miss
Yeah, Miss
Bailey.
Bailey's
I think she still
amazing.
teaches at Kapaa High
She's
School.
amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, and so that basically was the first time I ever made a short film and entered it into like a film festival. It was like a kids film festival and stuff like that. And then after that, I wanted to study film in university if I went, but I was surfing at the same time. So I ended up just surfing for a couple years and completely randomly by chance, I ended up getting an opportunity to work in the film industry and I moved to Vancouver, Canada for like a year and a half ish, and that was pretty brutal for me. That was pretty shocking, but just learned everything on the job.
The question is, where have you not lived?
Well, lived. I haven't lived a lot of places, but I've gone to a lot of places for work, which has been really fortunate to see the world and stuff. And it definitely makes you realize that there's no place better than home.
Yeah.
That's for sure. But that's why I'm here now in Aotearoa. So I've been working here for a year. Been working here on a film and a television series. So yeah, super fortunate. I love Aotearoa because obviously Tangata Maori versus Kanaka Maoli were like all cousins. So it's really nice to be here. And it's also really nice to be here and see like their tikanga and the way that they experience the natural world. Obviously very similar to Hawaii. But it's nice to have like that sense of people who are oriented towards the natural world and really want to care for their land and care for their people at the same time, which is what we're talking about today.
Mm-hmm.
But okay, so a little bit about you, a little bit about me. So I think if you don't mind, let's try to dive a little bit deeper now into what you're working on. So
Mm-hmm.
right now you are on Oahu. You are doing research with the University of Hawaii at Manoa. So where is your research based? And can you talk to us a little bit about what it is that you do day to day? Because I've gone to the facility that you work at and I've seen you guys, I've seen just a little bit of like the coral polyps that you're growing and the areas that you're putting the corals into. Like it is so interesting. And it's so beautiful. Like what a cool place to be doing research and learning and working. So can you talk to us a little bit about what it is you guys do and why you're doing it?
For sure. So when you go to like an upper level college or university for your master's or your PhD, typically what you do is you join a research lab. And so you go to your institution to do classes, but then you go to your lab space in order to do your research. And so for me, I'm studying at Manoa, but my main lab is actually called the Mega Lab, which stands for the Multi-Scale Environmental Graphic Analysis Lab. And so what they do is they do a bunch of imaging on coral and they build 3D models of the reef the lab space that Mainei is talking about that she came with me to is called Mokoloe, and that's an island in Kaneohe Bay. And basically, there are about 12 different labs on the island. And so, if you're studying marine biology or marine science, you can go there and use any of their facilities to do whatever you want. So, at the beginning of the semester, I was looking at outplanting different types of corals or outplanting structures that corals are really that they really really like that they want to settle on and build little homes on. And so it sounds
That's
really
so
nerdy, but
cute.
quite literally, I was building homes for tiny corals to live in so that they
That
were
is
happy.
adorable.
But what I realized sadly from doing that was when you outplant or build these spaces for corals, it's all good until you have a big flood or until you have some kind of crazy environmental disaster that disrupts everything. And then you kind of have to start from square one again, especially if the fresh water that's going into the ocean is somewhat polluted. And so I decided to switch my focus for instead of trying to like create a solution that would work temporarily until another like pollution outflooding event happened. I wanted to kind of get at the root of like, well, how do we make it so that the corals in that place can survive these big events? Which obviously is like, okay, we have to look at this problem in a more holistic way, which is what our kupuna did, which is the best way to care for coral is to make sure that we care for the whole system that affects the coral,
Yeah.
if that makes
Yeah,
sense.
definitely. Like kind of zooming out a little bit and looking at
Hmm.
everything more as a whole. So
Exactly.
can you describe the importance of coral and what it does? Because, so just for a quick context for us, in Hawaii, we have what is called the kumulipo, which is basically a story. It's a chant, which tells us our mo'oku oho, which is our genealogy as Hawaiian people all the way back to the beginning of time. And it talks about the creatures and the things that were established as time went forward. And the first living structure, which is the base for all other living structures, including humans and everything else that's alive on Earth, to live. Can you tell us what that was? What the first creature was?
It's the koa. It's the coral. So the chant literally says like hanau ka'u koa koa, and that's like talking about like born was the coral polyp and the coral. So the way that a lot of Hawaiian scientists tend to interpret that chant as well is when our kupuna were sailing from island to island, and going from island chain to island chain, they might have also used that chant as a way to identify the overall ecology and health of that place. So the first thing that they might do when they get to that space is how healthy is the coral? And if the coral is very healthy, that's a really good indicator that the whole island system is very
That's so
healthy.
interesting.
So there's like different layers and meaning to the kumulipo that are super, super
Right.
cool.
That's so interesting. And it's so true, right? So I mean, that is the basis of the health of an entire environment is the coral. And so can you talk a little bit more about how the coral is responsive to the rest of this holistic environment of the earth as you were kind of talking about before?
Yeah, exactly. If you go to places in like if you go to a really remote place, say like in Tahiti or Fiji, where there's not a lot of development and there's not a lot of wave action, you can see that coral grows really, really well. And there are different types of corals too, but long story short, the cleaner your water is, the cleaner your freshwater sources are, the healthier your coral's going to be. And if you look at like as a surfer, anybody who's a surfer knows when you surf at different places on the reefs, there will always be a place that's a channel.
Right.
And so channels are basically age-old indicators that there had been a river in that space. And so corals don't like to grow in fresh water, and they also don't like to grow anywhere that's like polluted or has a lot of sediment. And so anywhere that you see spaces in a reef where there's a big hole or like where there's a big channel cut out, it means that either a river has been through there or there's been some kind of like storm impact. But basically, corals to grow just need sunlight. They need healthy, clean water, and they need people to kind of let them do their thing and leave them alone, not touch them too much and not disturb the space.
Fair enough. I relate to
Yeah.
that.
I know they're choosy, they're very strong and they're very resilient, but also at like the slightest inconvenience, they're just like, nah.
That's amazing. I love that. Okay, cool. So a little bit of a background on corals and what they do for the whole environment. So obviously, I think everyone's pretty aware that the health of our corals worldwide is not the best at the current moment. So, what do you think is the future for our corals? And what are some efforts that you think are really beneficial to help our corals thrive and be able to live on for our generations to come?
I think if we take no immediate action and we let things unfold as it is, the health of our corals is in huge risk. With global warming, what it does, most of the corals grow kind of along the equatorial band because that's kind of the sweet spot where there's enough sunlight, this variety of factors that kind of similar to like on land rainforests, coral reefs are like the rainforest underwater. And
Mm,
so as global warming increases and that band gets hotter and hotter, what it does is it causes corals to bleach, and so we have seen there are some scientific papers that suggest corals will like migrate out of the hotspot to higher and lower regions on the planet as a defense mechanism. But the really sad thing is that they grow so slow that if all of the corals die and bleach and we lose that entire ecosystem, it's going to have disastrous effects on all of us. And the
wow.
time scale to recover those corals is so long that it will like it's a very, very big problem for all of us.
Wow.
Because if your base, your foundation level is gone, then all of the organisms and all of the biological relationships that depend on that to create like fish, food, everything that we sustain ourselves on is going to be completely gone. And it's going to be really bad. And I really, really urge everybody that they should care about this if they don't already, because it's going to end up like maybe at the end of our lifetime and the beginning of our children's lifetime, like it's going to be a huge, huge problem.
Right. Heavy stuff, man. It's really crazy. Even just me thinking off the top of my head, like when I go diving in the summer on Kauai, looking at reefs in certain places compared to when we were kids, you know, pretty barren. It's pretty crazy.
Hmm.
So all of that being said, there's definitely a time code on this. There's definitely an urgency of,
Or can I add
things and
something
action
else?
needing to be taken.
Can I add something
Yeah,
else
of
as
course.
well? So, like the other thing too, it's like, say you're not a person that lives on the coast where you eat fish all the time. Say you don't get to go in the ocean
Right.
very much. It still impacts everybody on the planet as well because corals are the base level of everything. So if they die, it greatly depreciates like even everything in terms of like water quality and all these other things in the ocean. And the ocean is the greatest source, obviously, of water on the earth. And people think, like, oh, yeah, salt water. But actually, all of the fresh water comes from evaporated water in the ocean that evaporates out as clouds and then rains onto the land. So if our ocean is dead and completely unhealthy, it's going to affect everybody because it's going to mess with everybody's freshwater sources, as well as
Right.
for coastal peoples around the world, culturally, to lose corals is like hugely detrimental. For us, it's like our grandparent, like losing a grandparent, losing a parent, a family member,
Yeah.
and like the amount
Yeah.
of intergenerational like hurt and pain that's going to cause is like horrible, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, I feel like that fact with, the affecting of fresh water sources and stuff is something that's really lesser known to a lot of people because people think corals and like you said, they just think ocean immediately right away. But yeah, there's so many other smaller factors because it is like the foundation of our world. And if you don't have a good foundation, then everything else is going to kind of follow suit with that. So, all of that being said, obviously, we don't want that to happen. We have a lot of amazing, incredible humans on Earth who are fighting really hard for that to not happen, including yourself. I've seen amazing documentaries about like the coral gardeners on Moorea,
Also,
near Tahiti,
all the people at the Mega Lab,
and the Mega
we
Lab.
work in
The
the
Mega Lab is amazing.
yeah, Haunani Kane is like a Hawaiian navigator, voyager, and an amazing
Yeah,
scientist. And she looks at coral reef health on time scales of like thousands to millions of years. She's my mentor. She does amazing work all throughout Hawaii and community-based
she's
research.
amazing.
John Burns as well, Cliff Capoto, they're like absolutely slaying. But
Yeah,
yeah,
they're amazing. yeah, it's super cool for me to be able to see that and that's another example of surfers, people who are really naturally connected through their environment, just, through their culture and through the things that they love to do, like surfing. They're taking action into their own hands, which is amazing. You guys are our little angels. But so all of that being said, so what can the average person say, even people who are living landlocked, barely go in the ocean, barely see the ocean, what is something small and attainable that people who don't have a very large connection with ocean, what can they do to help us, save our coral reefs?
For sure. I always say that the way that we're going to save the world is through small changes. So, kind of like if you're landlocked and you're not near the ocean, a small change you can do to help the planet is when you're not in your room, turn your light off. If you can avoid buying plastics, single-use plastics, it's literally a huge help. On the flip side, try not to pollute your freshwater river resources because eventually that's all going to flow to the ocean. And the ocean's kind of like the first indicator that something's going wrong on land. It changes in very short time scales. And I would say finally, if you can, find a way to empower indigenous people. Literally anybody or people, intergenerational peoples, people who have been on that land in that space for a long enough time that they know what's going on with everything. All humans are a part of the natural world, and we all
Yeah.
play a role in protecting it, but really like indigenous people that are empowered in their spaces are doing so much good work in terms of restoration and sustainability. But again, it shouldn't just be on indigenous people and multi-generational communities to fix this problem. We all need to come together, and we need to like, as well as voting smart, voting using your voice to speak up to protect the places that you love is going to be huge as well.
Yeah,
Caring.
caring. Absolutely. Yeah, and I think that's like a really good way to transition us into the fact that you said it perfectly. All humans are a part of the natural environment. Whether you're an indigenous person or not, it's still your environment. You're living in it. And I think all humans obviously have that intrinsic desire to be a part of their natural environment and also care for their natural environment. But that being said, it's really interesting perspective for us to be a part of our culture, our Hawaiian culture, and see so many amazing initiatives being taken by people in our community to restore, ways that might have been not forgotten, but maybe they were just asleep for a little while. Now they're waking back up, and seeing that kind of stuff take charge in this new wave of issues that we're facing as a world together. And I think it's really cool that, we actually do have the solutions for these to offer up to the world, and kind of make a bigger difference for everybody. So, what part of um, our like key traditional practices from Hawaiian culture are really important for you to hold on to, especially as you go deeper into your science? Because I think we were kind of having a conversation before about how sometimes science and research can be a little bit removed from like the places that they're actually at. Like, for example, I was just watching a documentary at a film festival here in Aotearoa called Maori Lands, and the documentary was about people who are trying to build like a new barge facility down on the east coast here, in this small village in Aotearoa, and the people were like, no one consulted them, no one asked them where is the best place to put this barge. They are the scientists of their area because they're the ones who have been monitoring every single natural event and tide and all of these different changes happening in their environment. But yet they're sending in these scientists from who knows where to come and take data away for maybe, a couple years at the most before going ahead and moving. Whereas if you consult with the normal people, with the people of that place first, you know, you would have a lot more happy people, and also, you would really know what the right thing is to do. So what are some takeaways from Hawaiian culture that you think are really, really important to integrate into your scientific processes?
I mean, I guess the biggest takeaway that I can initially think of from Hawaiian culture to apply to science is to look at everything as though it's interconnected. That's the biggest thing, is like there is no, like, humanity is not above nature. we're not analyzing and dissecting and picking this place apart. We're integrating ourselves into it, which means like if I'm doing science in a place, I'm going to build that community up. I'm going to know that community, like not only just the space and the places, but the people. And we're going to put together a real effort to make some change. It's not like I'm going to come, I'm going to collect data and I'm going to leave. That's the biggest thing is like from Hawaiian culture, the interconnectedness of everything, the necessity that you have to build community in spaces when you do things, as well as I would say treating things with genuine like aloha. Like if you're gonna go into a space and a place and you're gonna take data, you need to like ask. You need to ask the people that live there, are you okay with this? You need to ask like even do cultural protocols, ask the land if it's okay to go into the space to take that data. And for some people who are not Hawaiian that are scientists, they might find this kind of a little odd, but this is something that I always do whenever I go places. And I feel like it just, you end up, because you're treating everything with respect, like learning and seeing these certain things that you might have missed. If you just came with the attitude that, like, oh yeah, I'm going to get in and get out, as well as like your intention in that space. That's also something from Hawaiian culture that's really important. Having the intention of, like, I genuinely want to connect here and make a difference is just felt, I would say, holistically by anybody from any culture, rather than like my intent is to come here and collect data and publish a paper and get notoriety. Like I would say times are just changing and you can't do anything in life like that anymore. You can't do science like
Yeah.
that. You can't do like film like that. You can't do social
Yeah.
media. You can't do surfing like that. It's just
Yeah.
things are different across the board.
Yeah. Definitely. Yeah, you're definitely right. The world needs people to think as a team.
Yeah.
Think as a team and not an individual. I think that's something from our culture that is I feel so grateful to have grown up the way that we did because as a kid, like you're already always thinking about the community and it's kind of not only like your goal is always to serve your community and it feels the best when that's what you're doing. And I think as any human, it always feels the best when you're giving something back to a greater whole and when you're thinking about everyone. Like what do they say? They say it's a kako thing.
Yeah.
And so kako means all of us together. It's a kako thing, not a mako thing. A mako is like us and these people over here, not you. It's a kako thing. It's everybody.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, definitely thinking about that kind of stuff. And then also I think something that's really cool from our culture, which I think about a lot now at the stage of life that I'm in, is like the longevity and the building upon generational knowledge. That is the craziest thing, that we have
Yes.
certain things that we just know naturally because there have been thousands of generations of people who have been verifying and testing that kind of stuff, you know, for the whole time that they've been there. And it's amazing to be a part of that. And so now that
Mm-hmm.
I'm getting a little bit older, I'm thinking in that longevity, like what is, I mean, they're only small things, but if I'm going to do anything, what is one way that I can extend the longevity of this project that I'm doing and somehow to plant a little bit of a seed that's going to take it a little bit further, not for me, but for somebody else to kind of build upon
Yeah.
the greater whole of what I'm trying to accomplish. So I think yeah, there's so many.
Yeah, and that's called intergenerational thinking, where you're not thinking for yourself now in this present moment, or even now in 20 years. You're thinking now, but like 10,000 years down
Right.
the line. Like, how am I, like, that's what I always try to think of is like, how are the actions that I'm taking today going to affect like my children, my grandchildren, so that they can see these spaces in the way that I did, if not better? I really think about that a lot. Kind of lost my train of thought there. You had said something earlier where I was like, slay, but
Yeah, no, but for sure. I mean, I think everybody wants the best for their future generation and for their children and their children's children. But yeah, I think it was a really cool part of our culture is just being able to know, like thinking about what are you gonna say? Say it.
I remembered it. You're talking about how like indigenous knowledge systems, and like that's something that I use in my science as well all the time. Like even recently, or in Hawaiian culture, for people who don't know, when a lot of Hawaiian peoples were dying because of introduced diseases and also rapidly, not losing our culture, but rapidly our culture was getting suppressed by outside influences. What our kupuna did was they wrote a lot of different stuff down in what's called the New Pepa. And the New Pepa is like this collection of like about 100 years of weekly publications that are all written in Hawaiian language. And so what I do as part of my research is I go, and whenever I go to a place that I'm researching, like for instance in Anahola where we grew up, I've been reading the New Pepa about Anahola from about 1820 until about 1920 in terms to and I use all the stories that my kupuna wrote down in these newspapers as a way to understand how the land was changing over time. For instance, like I read an article that was from 1824, and it was a mo'olelo, so it was an intergenerational story that they had about Hi'iaka, who's this, she's like one of our ancient goddesses. And she was going through the town of Anahola, and when she gets to Anahola, she does this name chant where she summons all these different types of wind. And so it was just really cool because now, because of that story, I can classify the different types of wind in a modern sense, and I can connect them to names that my kupuna gave them. And doing that, I can go access stories about the names and how they decided to name these winds. And a lot of it has to do with natural patterns and storm events. And so like that's what we're talking about when we're talking about intergenerational knowledge. Any indigenous people or multi-generational peoples that live in a space know things because they've been there for so long. And it's not lost, it's recorded or it's passed down from person to person. When you're a scientist, the big thing is, well, how good is your data? How good is your data? How long were you in that space? And if you can say like, oh, I've got like 3,000 years worth of data, people are like, what? It's like,
Yeah. So
that's what I'm
yeah,
talking about. Like,
so
yeah,
cool. That's
yeah.
yeah. See, that's why I love stories. Like when I was,
Hmm.
when I was surfing on the QS and stuff, I started my Hawaiian studies degree online because I could do contests and stuff and in
Hmm.
between training and all that, just do school. And I loved it because I, of course, always loved stories, but like I loved all of the books and all of the mo'olelo that you get to read. And like storytelling has a lot of, different functions, entertainment, look, teaching morals, all these kinds of things. But honestly, information, like for us as Kanaka Maoli, that was our way of storing information. Hula, mo'olelo, and mele and oli chants and songs. Every single chant and song, it's not just, a face value type of thing, which I think a lot of people who don't know much about Hawaii and they come to visit Hawaii, they're enamored by hula and it's like this beautiful thing. But if you talk to anybody that does hula, you know that there is so much research and so much training that goes into everything. You have to perfect every single vowel, every single syllable, every single movement has to be perfect because your data must be correct. Because when you're doing a hula, you're essentially telling a story about places that are real. You're talking about these real things that happened, these real people that did these amazing things, and the names of the places and the winds. And a place name holds so much data, so much information about the significance of a place. It's able to tell you what happened there, what it's for, is it valuable, is it dangerous, is it this and that. Like there's so many amazing things about our culture that like lend amazingly towards storytelling. Those names of winds alone, that kind of stuff. I love those Hi'iaka saga on Kauai because you learn so many things about these places that you've gone to your whole life, like beaches that you might have surfed all the time, and then you'd be like, wow, I didn't know the reef was called that. We've all been calling it unreals because that's what everybody calls it. But in fact, every single reef area, every single fishing ground has a name. But unfortunately, the way that everything played out, a lot of our names got replaced or covered up with other names. But that's the cool thing about, today we have the opportunity to take all that stuff back. But yeah, stories are so
Hmm.
cool. I obviously am a story nerd, so I could talk all day about stories.
But that's what I think too. Like me writing, I could do all this research. I could write the best dissertation you've ever seen. It could be like amazing, but who's going to
Right.
read it? How is everybody going to relate to that? And I really think that's why your skill set is so important because I could recite the periodic table of elements to you and you'd be like, okay, cool. How am I supposed to
Right.
remember that? But if I did like a dance where I was, hydrogen or whatever, you might remember
Yeah, for
it. So
sure.
that's why like people who are storytellers, hula dancers, people who even surfers who really have like super style and can make you feel a certain type of way when you watch them surf. I think that's so beautiful and it relates on so many levels. So important to have that creative side to you. You can make people feel and understand,
Right.
you know? And I think that's what's really special about what you do.
Yeah, I definitely see, I think filmmaking is like such an incredible art. It's so difficult. I give so much props to anybody who's ever made a film. Like there's always a crazy story behind films that are made because, there's 1,000 things that go into making a film. But I kind of like to think, even though it is amazing, like I try not to think about it as too precious. And I also kind of like to think about it as it's like a vehicle to help a greater thing. It's like this awesome way to like help other greater ideas move forward, which is kind of what I want to do and sort of try to do with my films. I just finished a short this last summer. That short was it's about the state of Hawaii right now. So if you aren't aware, it is very, very difficult to own a home in Hawaii. I won't say impossible. Obviously, nothing is impossible, but it is, one of the most expensive places in America to buy land or a house. And a lot of people who are locals there, they're forced to move somewhere else because not only can they not afford to live there and pay their rent, they also can't afford the super high prices of food from stores, which is also another science-based issue having to do with like
Hmm.
sourcing our food locally, which Hawaii is such a completely capable place of doing such a thing. The greater message that my film was trying to push along was the fact that we have a huge cultural issue because if we don't have Hawaiians in our natural environment, we lose that massive piece of our ecosystem, which helps sustain the natural environment and help Hawaii stay Hawaii and keep Hawaii beautiful and thriving for our next generation. And also, if we're not there, our next generation isn't even going to be there. So that was just, something that I think was usually when I try to come up with films, it's usually always something that's like a really pressing issue to me, something that's really affected me. Because people are always going to remember, kind of going back to what you're saying, you can have all the facts in the world, but the thing that people are really going to remember is how you made them feel. Because we're humans and we feel so deeply, whether we like it or not. So if you can get somebody to feel something, they are never, ever going to forget those facts that you've presented to them. So that's kind of what I try to do. So that film that I did was sort of like a vehicle to push forward that idea of like, this is happening. And it's nice because film is such a digestible platform for all kinds of people around the world. You don't have to be from Hawaii to see it. And it's also kind of like what is the word? What is it called when you do something and it helps you? It is also kind of a healing thing.
Oh, therapeutic.
It
Therapeutic.
That wasn't the word, but I'll go with therapeutic. But it is also like filmmaking is kind of like a therapeutic thing because say for example Kahuli, the film that I'm referring to right now that I made, so many people came up to me in the community afterwards and were like really affected by it and they were like, wow, thank you so much, that is exactly how I was feeling, that's exactly what I've just gone through. And it's so nice to see other people are seeing this issue, like they feel very seen from things that you make, which to me is like that's the best part of the whole process. When you see something on a screen that's an issue that you are going through, it also helps you process that issue, because you go through this journey of a story
Hmm.
and it has this introduction and then the conflict and then the tipping point and the resolution. And it kind of helps you be able to go through that journey yourself in a way and helps you feel seen and also
Hmm.
helps you kind of go through all of that because like the housing crisis in Hawaii was just really bothering me and it's still bothering me, but like
And
it doesn't sit right with me to
yeah.
know that there's Hawaiians that can't be in Hawaii. That's, especially being in Aotearoa. I've been in Aotearoa for a year and a bit now, and it's not a perfect world over here either, but they've got so much land, and it is so available for their Maori people to access their land, not even just live on it, like access other parts of Aotearoa, like other places where their whānau live, and go on to that aina and like be able to like learn about it and see all that stuff. And so that is why they have such a strong culture and such a strong environment here, is because they're so able to access it. So anyway, it's just, you can't have.
And I will say too, Aotearoa as well is like one of the best environmentally
Yeah,
managed places I have ever been to personally. And that's also because the local Maori people and the community in that space, even if they're not Maori, have really adopted community-based
yeah,
monitoring things and also community-based care for their
yeah,
spaces. Having people feel similarly to you do and wanting to care for and love a place is really like, I think you can get that whether you're an indigenous person or
yeah,
non-indigenous.
definitely,
And it's so beautiful.
definitely. But yeah, there's definitely a really cool crux between storytelling, filmmaking, and science. I kind of think about that a lot, honestly, because you and I are very similar, but at the same time so different. And I kind of like to think that you're the one out doing
Hmm.
like the hard business, and I'm just like, yeah, I'll make a film about it when you figure out the problem. Yeah, figure out the problem so I
I
can help
know.
you
It's almost
spread
like,
the
it's
word.
like,
Like that's kind of what I see it as.
well,
Yeah.
that's what it is. That's what it's
Yeah.
all about.
Like I'm not the
Yeah.
freshest one here. What I'm doing is important, but it definitely can make like a big impact in the way that people remember things and digest information, which I think is super cool.
Exactly. And then even going beyond that too, like it's like scientists and like biologists and all these types of people are like the ones that are watching everything. And then creatives and everybody who
Mm,
makes filmmaking is like, okay, like now that you've seen, like you're saying, now that you've seen the problem, this is how we get it out. And then like even continuing the next steps, having people who are in leadership recognize that, recognize the needs of like the whole and be like, okay, yeah, like we're going to create laws and we're going to do things to protect that space. And then people who are gardeners or people who are fishermen or all, everybody has a role to play in keeping a space beautiful.
definitely. It's all teamwork for the planet. That's for sure. And that's, I think, the amazing thing about when you think about environmentalism is like it really is this huge team effort. Every single person has an amazing gift that is super special and specific to their own person. And that's your gift that you're able to share. So I hope everybody can find that gift and use it in whichever way you like to, help play for the whole team.
Yeah, that's Kuleana.
Yeah, Kuleana. Okay, so wrapping up our conversation, lots of good things that we touched on here. Looking forward, what are some of your hopes and aspirations for the future of sustainability within the context of culture and everything that we can do within that?
I would say that my hopes and aspirations for the future in terms of culture and sustainability is seeing as many Kanaka Maoli or indigenous people as scientists, as politicians, filmmakers. I just want to see indigenous peoples empowered everywhere. I really think that that's going to make a huge difference in terms of decision making, thinking, action, environmental action, as well as everybody in the world can name 10 places where they had the most special life-changing memories of all time. And if you can take care of those places that really made you who you are, that's how the world is going to become a better place.
Yeah,
Through small efforts because you actually love that place.
yeah,
That's the whole takeaway, whether you're indigenous or non-indigenous.
yeah, absolutely. And that's the concept of aloha aina as well. You aloha the aina because the aina aloha's you, and you have that pilina, that relationship with that place. And you don't have to go far to do that. Like you're saying, you can do it right there, wherever you are in the world, no matter where you are.
And what about you? Like, what are your hopes and aspirations?
I really hope it's already happening. I know our generation, there are so many amazing people that are making huge strides for our culture in Hawaii that's really contributing back to our environment, back for our people and our rights to taking care of the earth. But I really, really would love, just thinking about Hawaii, the place that we're from, I'd love to see a Hawaii where indigenous people, where Kanaka Maoli have their land back. Because that having that land back is the number one key to establishing those relationships, so that those places that have been neglected, that need a little bit of care, can get the care that it needs to help balance our entire environment. So I would love to see Kanaka Maoli with their land back. I'd love to see that one happening. And also, what I would really love to see is, even though we want our land back, the world is going in a certain direction. I want to see way more of our language being spoken in spaces that it's not spoken in yet. Like, I would love to just go to a restaurant, like a normal restaurant, and order something in Olelo, Hawaii, order a coffee in Olelo, Hawaii. Even not just like us local people. Like, I want it to be applied to everybody. And just those small things, because I just want, that culture to be like more outward facing, because that's the first little step to getting people to really integrate. And the language and everything is the key to getting people to understand the land, because the language is formed from the place. If you understand the language, you understand the place. So that doesn't just touch other Kanaka Maoli and indigenous people. I have a lot of work to do, that's for sure. But like, everybody, like, how cool would it be to just hear like people that have no Hawaiian blood just going la 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 la. I'll be like, damn, that's sick. You know what I mean? Like, and they do.
Yeah, when we were in Aotearoa, there was like that little boy who was like 6 years old, not Maori at all, and he was just, his Olelo, or his Maori language was so good.
This boy was narrating a public event, speaking in front of 1,000 people. He was narrating a film festival, and he was like 6 years old, and he was fluent te reo. Incredible.
And English.
That's what I would love to see. Yeah, and English. Like, it's amazing. But anyway, I definitely see all of that stuff coming, and I definitely have a lot of hopes for our future. I know it's incredible people like yourself, other people at the Mega Lab, and people all over the world who just love the Aina and love the earth are going to come together. So thank you so much, Maluhia, for all of your time today. Catch a wave for me. Stay warm for me, go in the sun for me.
You're going to be catching better waves at Teaupō than me.
We'll see. I'll be like, Vahine!
Vahine, please!
KBT, help me, I'm getting smashed on the inside.
Kohai, can I please have a wave?
Yeah. I actually think Vahine might be at the contest.
I think she's in Australia,
But yeah. All right. Okay. Well, love you. Thanks for the chat. Thank you to ROXY for having us today. If you're listening, I hope that you get to go outside and enjoy our beautiful earth, give back in whatever way you can, and we will see you guys next time at the ROXY podcast. Aloha.
Aloha.
Thank you so much to everyone for listening. Let us know what you'd like to hear in upcoming episodes by hitting us up on Instagram, Facebook, or Twitter. We'd love to hear from you.